Hi there, Infernal here. Today I wanted to talk about some iconic gaming moments. The ones that, even if I forget certain things about games, I'll never forget these exact moments. And now I know that some of these might be more universally iconic, but nevertheless, these are the ones that I feel had a huge impact on me and left me thinking about them far after I had played them. So they're not necessarily what I would call the greatest moments necessarily, but they kind of changed the way I thought about video games, and I think they are really important to me for that reason. And they're the things that make games stay with us, I think, even long after we've kind of shelved them a little bit. I wanted to start with Chrono Trigger, which is a game I did mention on my top 10 list last time. But the specific moment I'm talking about is when you visit the Kingdom of Zeal for the first time. Especially the reveal when you are warped out of the cave and see the huge splendor in front of you. It's like the combination of that amazing music with the visuals, especially the first time I saw that, completely blew me away. And I think a lot of it is just like, it kind of expanded on this idea of how grandiose and imaginative a world could be. Because Chrono Trigger, while it's pretty fantastical and deals with time travel elements, I do feel that it's somewhat grounded in certain ways as an RPG. When you see Zeal though, I feel like it's such a spectacle, and it's goes beyond what I thought the scope of the game would be. And in fact, I think it kind of kindled a lifelong obsession with floating islands in fantasy settings. I think, again, the combination of the particular music they chose for that scene with how crazy and grandiose it feels is kind of one of my favorite moments of the game. I mean, I wouldn't say it's maybe the best moment, but it is the one that sticks with me the most. I especially like how it seems like it's literally the center of the entire world. Like, it's just this kind of floating kingdom surrounded by water and clouds. And it's like, that's kind of a crazy idea in and of itself. And then combined with the visual of it, makes it super memorable to me. It's an example of wonder through discovery, and it kind of, to my memory, it's one of the first times that a game caused me to feel that kind of awe, in a way. And so the next game that I think fits this sort of memorable moment for me is kind of the entire finale of Super Metroid. I've mentioned several times here that Super Metroid is my favorite game, and there's definitely a reason for that, mostly because of how it handles atmosphere, and especially the way that it handles storytelling through environmental clues and with very little text. There's a exposition scene at the beginning that kind of explains the backstory mostly, but beyond that, everything that happens after that is told visually as you just play the game. Like, you'll see, you know, dead soldiers on the ground, and you'll see dead space pirates and things like that, and also just elements of a world that maybe existed there before, long before Samus had arrived. But specifically the moment I'm talking about is the Mother Brain fight. And what's really cool about that is it recalls the original Metroid, where you're fighting Mother Brain in a glass chamber, where that game ended after you simply defeat Mother Brain through the glass. But Super Metroid turned that on its head by revealing that the mother brain monster was actually below the brain part. And so that was a huge shocking reveal. But then the next part that I really think stuck with me even longer is when the Metroid that you had tried to save it from the very beginning of the game comes back, now fully grown, to save Samus before she's about to die. She's literally on zero, basically no health. You're out of weapons, and she's literally struggling on the ground. And the Metroid, in a last heroic effort and act, saves you. And it's such this like emotional payoff moment, and it's conflicting too, because you spent the whole game sort of remembering this Metroid as the single Metroid that Samus could almost be a mother to, in a sense. And you wanted to protect it. And then seeing it kind of die in that last moment it's cathartic in a way, though, because it gives Samus this newfound power to finally take down Mother Brain. And it's that emotional weight of that moment that I just loved so much. So the next one that really stuck with me in a game is kind of a similar emotional payoff moment. And, well, it's rather that the setting is a similar idea of a final conflict, a final battle. And that is in Ocarina of Time. And I've mentioned that I like Link to the Past a little bit more as a game than Ocarina, but I think that Ocarina is really good at atmosphere, and this particular part always sticks with me. It's that part where the castle's collapsing after you've beaten Ganondorf, and you're kind of walking up the stairs and you're hearing the music play as the castle is literally crumbling around you. And then there's a moment where the music cuts out and you just see Zelda and Link at the top of what used to be, the full extent of Ganon's castle. And it's through a lightning strike. Basically, Ganon is revealed, and the camera moment that shows the showdown between Link and Ganon, especially showing Ganon's immense size and the contrast to how Link looks, is so awesome to me. And now that we know that there's a follow-up, a remake, if you will, which is technically a remake of a remake, I guess, at this point, of Ocarina of Time, it makes me excited to see maybe how that will be handled with current technology too. Because I think it is a testament, though, to how strong the art direction is in that scene, where even with the kind of very dated, let's face it, N64 graphics, it still resonates really well. And I think that's why it's such a strong scene for me. And it also has a similar emotional payoff, not as much of a tragedy, but more that you're finally ready to get revenge on Ganon for destroying the world. And I think that that's why it has such an impact. Okay, so the next part is actually two separate games in the same franchise, and they're kind of a tie to me because I think that they had different impacts in different ways. So I'll start with the first one, and that's the Psycho Mantis fight in Metal Gear Solid 1.
What's wrong?
Because that one, I think, stuck with me because it showed the extent of what a video game could be. It kind of explored that in the medium of games, we can do different things than is expected. And I can say for sure that I would not have thought to plug in my controller to the second controller port unless I had read a strategy guide back then. Because we didn't really have the same wide availability of strategy guides on the internet. There were things like GameFAQs and things like that. But I think that it was such a surprise to see that kind of thinking used in a game. And also how Psycho Mantis can read your memory card. And he picks up on Konami games you've played, like Symphony of the Night, for example.
You like Castlevania, don't you?
And I think that that was such a cool feature that maybe it wasn't necessary, but it really just felt like it was another layer of immersion brought forth to the game. And then the second one, though, the second moment is in Metal Gear Solid 2. There's a lot of these, and a lot of people say it's kind of the switch up of how we were sort of trolled by Kojima into thinking that Solid Snake was going to be the main protagonist of the game, only to find out it's Raiden later. And in fact, about 90% of the game is Raiden. So that is one that a lot of people mention. But the one for me specifically is actually when the Colonel's AI begins to slowly unravel.
So off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power
And
right now.
it's kind of the
What's wrong with
combination of just how it begins speaking kind of gibberish for a while too. And I think that really stuck with me, but also the fact that a lot of the speeches that he makes are strangely relevant today for a game that came out in 2001, especially about the nature of AI and warfare, and just the idea of these kind of soldiers being trained in virtual reality and having AI military personnel, I think is really prophetic in a weird way. And it becomes something that I actually like to revisit now because I can view it from a different lens in a sense.
I hear it's amazing when the famous purple stuffed worm in Flapjaw space with the tuning fork does a raw blink on Harry Carey rock. I need scissors. 61.
So those two are a tie for me for the Metal Gear franchise. The next would be to go back to Dark Souls again. But the moment specifically I'm thinking of is when you first see Knight Artorias, when you fight him. And I think this is significant because he's a character that is mentioned in the lore of the base game pretty extensively, because he's a big part of the backstory actually. And you've kind of heard this character getting built up throughout the game. And in fact, you even fight Sif in the main game, who is Artorias' dog. And what was great though is when you finally see him, it's such a cool scene when he comes down and destroys one of those enemies. But it's also this tragic figure because he has been corrupted by the Abyss and he's been lost entirely to it. But he still retains his fighting style and the way he looks. And it becomes such a really cool fight. And in fact, it's like probably my favorite fight in the entire game. Even though it's not the hardest fight, I think it's the one that sits with me the most. It really hits harder for me. And it especially hits hard doing the DLC and coming back and fighting Sif after. And it's very tragic, and you have to bring out the that's quite a tearjerker at that point. but I think it's a cool moment because this is a character they've built up as being one of the strongest knights of this entire kingdom, but he's fallen. He's actually lost. And you find out that it's actually you, the player, that stopped the spread of the abyss. And I think it's both the reveal and that kind of twist that made it so iconic for me. And then the next one that I wanted to mention on the note of FromSoft is in Bloodborne. And it should be no surprise that I'm mentioning Bloodborne again, but again, the moment I'm talking about is the Ludwig fight, specifically when, after the halfway point of the fight, he falls to the ground and notices the Moonlight Greatsword next to him. And the dialogue is really amazing, but also the moment is amazing because he's rediscovering his humanity.
You were at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
And Ludwig also sits as a tragic figure because he is someone that had a righteousness about him, but was corrupted in the hunter's dream. And I think that the combining of the song there that plays, especially when it gets more bombastic on the phase 2 of the fight, with the line of dialogue, which is a game that doesn't really have much in the way of boss dialogue anyway. And so they chose a moment that I think was really the best to let that happen. So I think that that would be the one that I would choose from Bloodborne specifically. Okay, and then I would say number 3 in my FromSoft here is in Sekiro. I haven't really mentioned Sekiro that much, but I do love it. And I would say the entire Sword State Ishin fight just really sits so highly for me because the setting is so cool with the field just with occasional lightning strikes at night. It reminds me of classic samurai films too, and I love the little taunts that Ishin throws your way. And the fight itself is one of the most satisfying in the game, in a game that already has a ton of satisfying combat as it is, because it's like a culmination of all the things you've learned in the game, all the deflections and Mikiri counters, and just your ability to think fast on your feet. It brings it all together, and from the start of the battle to the end, when Wolf emerges victorious, just feels so impactful. And I love that fight a lot. Okay, next is in Final Fantasy VI. And the moment I'm choosing in this is the World of Ruin. So when Kefka actually wins. And this was so huge for me because up to that point, I hadn't really played a game where the villain wins to that extent, because he really destroys the world. It's apocalyptic. And you had gone through the game up to that point in a sort of standard JRPG setting with quiet, idyllic towns and just like a nice, pretty backdrops. And you're thrust into this world where it almost is like all hope is lost. And it's not just the moment where it's destroyed, but I think it's really that part where Celis is determining if she wants to even go on anymore because she feels like she's alone. And then at the last moment, she gains some hope and decides to go searching for the other party members. I just thought that was such a powerful moment in that, because it's like finding hope in a really hopeless situation. And I just think it was really bold of them to consider making a decision like that, of let's destroy the entire world and still pick ourselves up from it after. And then last, speaking of picking yourself up from things, the Aerith death in Final Fantasy VII. Now, that's clearly a moment that I think is pretty universally shared, especially those who might have experienced Final Fantasy VII when it came out like I did. Because while it's not the first time historically that a main protagonist was killed in a game, it's the first one I specifically remember. And I think the thing that is striking about it is that at the moment it was shocking, but I've actually realized how it's actually pretty deep as I've come back to it all these years. Because one of the things is that it's so stark when it happens, and it kind of almost feels incidental, and the party is just forced to sort of continue as if life goes on. But the more I think about that, that's actually kind of realistic though. And I had heard that Yoshinori Kitase, the director, had experienced the loss of his mother during the development cycle, and that it kind of informed a lot of the decisions about how Aerith was to be killed there. And it makes it more striking as a result. I'm someone personally who lost a parent in my mid-20s, and I think the thing that sticks with you is, beyond the void and the loss, is that life is sort of forced to go on around it despite that happening. Despite the tragedy, it's like things just happen still because they have to. And I think that they actually captured that really well in Final Fantasy VII. And I kind of realized that coming back to it later, that it's a lot deeper than I even thought back then, even though back then it was more about the shock of it. And especially the tragedy of the fact that it's not entirely necessary, because I think that it wouldn't have necessarily changed the arc of the story had she lived or died. And especially the fact that she dies in disc 1. So basically there's 2 more discs that are filled with adventuring without her anymore. And especially how it spent all that time building up a relationship with her. So even after all this time, I still think that that is the one moment that sticks with me the most. What I'm landing on at the end of this is that even all these moments, even if they're tragic or happy or hopeful or boisterous, they're all memorable because they kind of change the way I thought about games, especially stories in games. And I've noticed too, as I selected these, they're all kind of moments that are non-verbal in a sense. Like they don't have much in the way of lines of dialogue, well, except for the Bloodborne one, and there's part of it in Ocarina of Time, but in general, a lot of them are just told very stark, very visually, and it lets it sit with you, I think, even stronger as a result of that. And I just think that they kind of stuck with me even longer, and it reminds me why I just love games so much. So I hope some of these are also moments that stuck with you guys too. If these moments brought back a few memories of your own, I'd love to hear about them in the comments too. Is there a moment that stayed with you all these years too? And if you'd like to help me make more videos like this, there are a couple of easy ways to support this channel. If you're picking up a game, importing a physical release, or adding something to your collection, using my PlayAsia affiliate link, which will be up here, is a great way to support the channel at no additional cost to you. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also join me on my Patreon, where I share some behind the scenes, works in progress, and updates on everything in and outside of YouTube. Every bit of support helps me spend more time creating these videos, and I truly appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.